The Birth of a Nation, 2016. An American period drama film based on the life and story of Nat Turner, an enslaved preacher who leads a slave rebellion in Southampton County, Virginia, 1831. Now, the movie has been surrounded in controversy because of the film's lead actor, writer, director, and producer, Nate Parker, and his controversial personal life. I think as a fan, it's important to separate the art from the artist. Sometimes it can be difficult, but a story like Nat Turner's is so important. We should judge the film based off its quality, not its creator. I think it's a very interesting choice of title. Nate Parker is almost trying to cleanse Hollywood of its original sin, The Birth of a Nation, 1915, by telling a harrowing story about America's original sin, slavery. The original Birth of a Nation, written and directed by D.W. Griffith, one of America's greatest filmmakers, tells the story of two families dealing with the aftermath of the Civil War during Reconstruction. The film is considered one of the greatest and most influential movies of all time, and it's also extremely racist. If you have not seen it, it is a deeply disturbing and unintelligent alternate view of history where the KKK are basically the Avengers. Roger Ebert once said about Birth of a Nation that it is a great film arguing for evil. With the release of Birth of a Nation 2016, Nate Parker successfully subdues the legacy of its namesake. When you hear Birth of a Nation going forward, you are going to think Nat Turner, which is a good thing, but that doesn't mean the movie is any good. I don't think I've ever been more conflicted about a film. Is it terrible? Is it a masterpiece? Is it somewhere in the middle? I don't know. It tells the story of Nat Turner, an exceptionally intelligent slave who was eventually forced by his master, Samuel Turner, to preach obedience to his fellow slaves. While preaching throughout Virginia, Turner witnesses the horrors of slavery. During his first sermon, he is called upon to preach obedience and domination to a group of slaves living in inhospitable conditions of sickness and famine. And Turner is almost unable to preach a single word. His disbelief gradually turns into a realization and inspires him to take up arms against the slave masters of Virginia. Set 30 years before the Civil War, the rebellion only lasts for 48 hours, before it is suppressed and Turner is eventually hanged, beheaded, flayed, and dismembered by his captors, who hope to remove any trace of his legacy. Unsuccessfully. The biggest flaw of the movie is how cinematic it truly is. It is filled with historical inaccuracies that almost turn the film into a superhero origin story. Some moments are a bit cheesy. Turner was an extremely bright individual who believed that through his visions and scripture, he was called to lead a slave rebellion. And personally, I would have preferred a truthful, unbiased account of Nat Turner's life, which would have been more powerful than Hollywood cliches and tropes. Constant moments of brutality and emasculation remove any growing tension to Turner's convictions. The one thing we know for certain about his story is the rebellion, a brutal, bloody account of death and murder that was justified by slavery. It wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the only thing to do. These people had a right to fight back, a right that Turner discovered while on the road preaching to his fellow slaves. The film portrays him as a superman rather than a great man who is burdened with an impossible task because of circumstance. He is fighting an unwinnable war. His moments of realization and emasculation are so cinematic and contrived towards the film's overall message, it leaves little room for a natural, sympathetic view towards the main character. You would have to be a wicked individual not to be sympathetic towards Nat Turner and his struggle, but the movie is screaming for your sympathy, like we won't understand the impact and reasoning of his actions. By the time Turner leads his rebellion, the audience should have been tricked into believing that it was going to be a success, and your hatred and contempt for slavery and his perpetrators should run as deep as Turner's, but it's just not the case. For all the moments of brutality and emasculation, the actual rebellion itself was not as convincing. Historical inaccuracies and Hollywood plot devices are not worthy of this real, brutal, uncompromising fight for freedom. Keeping the story true to itself sends a more powerful message than inventing moments of treachery or heroism. This is a story that tells itself, and there's a lot of music cues and moments of self-righteousness and demeaning moments that are just not as impactful as they could have been. At times, it really does feel like a Marvel movie. Well, a Marvel movie without jokes. It feels like a DC movie.
The feeling of powerlessness.
And the final conflict of the rebellion in the movie feels like a boxing match. It was like, in this corner we have Nat Turner and the freedom fighters, and in this corner we have Rorschach and the white supremacists. Dude, like, you don't have to add any historical inaccuracies to this story. It's great on its own. Just tell the story. Nate Parker as Nat Turner is the best acting I have seen all year. As we watch his career unfold, it will be hard to separate the actor from this legendary freedom fighter and this great performance. It's a performance that I felt deserved a steadier hand behind the camera, but this is Nate's film. He used $100,000 of his own money to finance the film, and it was 7 years in the making. This was a story that he felt so passionate about that he put up his own money. Other than Nat Turner, the other characters in the movie are forgettable or noticeably silenced, like Gabrielle Union's character, who literally doesn't say a word throughout the whole movie. Jackie Earle Haley is a very convincing human embodiment of the mentality of slavery. He is a terrifying villain in a movie that didn't necessarily need one. The real villain in the movie is the mentality of slavery. This mentality that some races are superior to others. You see these two characters, Nat Turner and Samuel Turner, his owner, that are born on the opposite sides of the imaginary line of superiority. And it's depressing. You see these two characters who grew up together as boys, as innocent children, not seeing each other as black and white, but seeing each other as equals, as friends. And then they grow up on different sides of the spectrum, and it leads to this bloody clash that becomes inevitable because of the disease of slavery, because of that mentality. So I would have to give the movie a 5 out of 10. When I left the theater, I liked it. I thought it was going to be a 9 out of 10. Then I slept on it. I read some of the historical accounts of Nat Turner's life, and it's not a movie that's not focused. It's almost too focused on the wrong thing. I think it's a very strong performance by the lead actor. The cinematography is beautiful. It's well directed in terms of how the movie looks, but not necessarily the feel of the film. I'm looking forward to his next project because I think Nate Parker is very talented, but I think this movie should have been much better.